Hello and welcome back. So today I am going to be talking to you about the Nikon Z 14 to 30mm f4 lens versus the Nikon 14 to 24 f2.8 lens and which one is right for you. I'm literally just back from the photography show in the UK and I met a lot of people over there, and the number one question I was asked is, which ultra-wide angle lens is better and which one is right for me, Kieran? And it was obviously down to the 14 to 30 f4 and the 14 to 24 f2.8. And now this might seem incredibly straightforward, but it's not as simple as you might think. So come on, let's get into it and I'll walk you through it and talk you through it. So if you're thinking about buying either the 40 to 30 f4 or 14 to 24 f2.8 lens, this is a really tricky one. And there are a lot of differences between them, but one of them could very well be the better option for you. Or is there any difference? Well, I'm going to talk you through my personal journey, which one I bought, the differences between them, and which one I think could possibly be right for you. So I'm going to be looking at this from a number of different photography genres, from architectural, astro, landscape, seascape, long exposure photography, and travel photography. And we're going to be looking to see which one is better for each of those different genres. I'm going to explain why I personally went for the 14 to 30 f4 over the 14 to 24 f2.8. And this is not saying the 14 to 30 f4 is going to be right for you, because each lens has specific advantages. And speaking of the 14 to 30 f4 lens, I can also put up a more detailed review of this lens if you'd like it. So if you'd like to see that, please do let me know in the comments down below and I'll get around to doing that fairly soon. This video, as per usual, is broken into a number of different chapters, so please do feel free to skip forward to the chapter you're looking for. But I highly recommend you watch the whole video because there could be a few surprises in there that you didn't know. Now, the first thing most people will look at when they're considering buying a lens has to be its price. Looking at the prices today at the time of making this video on the Nikon USA website, the 14 to 24 f2.8 lens is retailing for $2,300, whereas the 14 to 30 f4 lens is retailing for $1,150. Now, I'm quoting dollars here because most of my audience apparently is based in the United States, so hello America, firstly. And secondly, the prices are kind of similar enough worldwide that the 14 to 30 f4 is roughly half the price of the 14 to 24 f2.8. So it should be accurate enough worldwide. Now, when you look at the price difference, you think performance-wise, there isn't that much of a difference between these two lenses. So should that be your primary deciding factor, the fact it's half the price? But there's more to it than that. So let's look a little bit deeper and see what the exact differences are. Looking at the weight of both lenses then, the 14 to 30 f4 lens weighs 485 grams, whereas the 14 to 24 f2.8 lens weighs 650 grams. So there's quite a bit of a weight difference there, with the 14 to 34 being the lighter and the easier to carry lens. Size then is the next thing to look at, and I have the 14 to 30 f4 lens here. And as you can see, it's a collapsible design. So when you open out the lens, it actually extends, whereas the 14 to 24 stays the same length. So this is a lot easier to pack inside in your camera bag. It's about 33% smaller. So from the point of view of weight and from the point of view of size, the 14 to 30 f4 is going to be a lot easier to carry around. Both of these cameras are weather sealed, but the 14 to 24 f2.8 has a better weather sealing than the 14 to 30 f4 lens, and that's partially due to the collapsible design of the lens itself. In saying that though, I have used my 14-30 f4 in some fairly extreme conditions, and I have never encountered a problem with the weather sealing, and I know a load of other people who use it in exactly the same situation, and they also have had no issue whatsoever. To make this all a bit easier, I'm going to be putting landscape, seascape and long exposure photography all in the same genre here just for the sake of it, as the lenses both perform more or less the same in all of them. And for me personally, hands down, the winner here has to be the 14-30 f4 lens for a few different reasons. The first being its size. The second, its weight, so it's very easy to carry around when you're going hiking and travelling across sandy beaches for a kilometre or so. You're going to be a lot happier. But the more important thing for me personally is the 82mm filter thread on the front of the lens. With an 82mm filter thread there, that means you can quite easily use 100mm filter holders, so you have no problem then fitting on filters, using grad filters, using a CPL on this lens. So that is a huge advantage for the 14-30 f4 lens. The 14-24 f2.8 lens also has a special adapter that comes in the box first day, which means you can put 112mm filters on the front, screw-in filters in the front. So you can buy 112mm CPL or ND filters or a UV filter, but they are extremely expensive, whereas the 82mm system is an awful lot cheaper. So the clear winner for landscapes, seascapes and long exposure photography for me has to be the 14-30 f4 lens, just purely from practical reasons. The 100mm filter holder, lighter weight and smaller form factor too as well. Just make this the clear winner over the 14-24 f2.8. Architectural photography then is the next thing I'm going to look at. And as someone who does a lot of architectural or real estate photography, this one is a small bit more tricky for a few different reasons. Now there could very well be a lot of people shouting at their screens right now saying, "Oh my God, Kieran, the 14-24 f2.8 lens is clearly a lot better for architectural photography. There is no comparison. What are you even talking about?" Because it's sharper, the distortion is slightly less, and it also lets in one stop of more light. So yes, if you're only going to use this lens for architectural purposes, the 14-24 f2.8 lens is fractionally better. So why do I say then that for real estate or architectural photography that there's no real difference in them? Well, for me personally, whenever I'm shooting real estate, I'm using a tripod. So that one stop of a light level difference isn't going to make an awful lot of difference. I can just expose my photograph for a small bit longer. Or I can use flash too as well, of course. I normally have a few speed lights with me, or something like the newer Q4 high-powered battery strobe light, which has 400 watts of power, so that is loads to light up a room incredibly easily and quickly. So getting back to it then, the other differences are contrast, distortion and sharpness. And the differences in the three of those between the 14-24 f2.8 and the 14-30 f4 are very, very fractional. And what I've personally found is the people that will notice that are definitely not my clients. The people who are going to notice that are photographers, because they'll zoom in at 100 or 200%. And personally, I haven't worked for any photographers, and I'm not really looking to sell any of my prints to photographers either. I'm not saying I'd say no, but you know, it would be an incredibly limited market. So the point being is, if you're looking to do this work and use it for these genres, you're not going to see an absolutely massive difference. But if you're only going to use the lens for architectural photography, the 14-24 f2.8 is fractionally better. If you're looking at either two of these lenses from the point of view of astrophotography, then you simply have to buy the 14-24 f2.8 lens because it is just far superior. That's the end of it. There's no more to discuss here. So at this stage now, you've probably already noticed that yes, I did buy the 14-30 f4 lens, and you might be looking at your screen and smiling and saying, well, Kieran, you have the wrong lens for astrophotography and maybe not the ideal lens for architectural photography. And this is where I throw the cat in amongst the pigeons because The reason why I didn't choose the 14-24 f2.8 over the 14-30 f4, and this is it, and this is the Laowa 12mm f2.8 rectilinear zero distortion lens. And I've had this lens for quite a while now. And yes, I did say 12mm. This lens is so wide you can see yesterday in your photographs. And yes, I did say yesterday. It's criminally wide, but going from 14 to 12 is just nuts. The biggest problem I have with this lens is catching the tripod legs in the photographs. And yes, you would be shocked at how often I've managed to do that. Now, why am I talking about this lens? I'm talking about this lens because I love this lens for astrophotography and I love this lens for architectural photography. And the reasons why are, it's an f2.8 lens. It's also very sharp and it's a manual focus lens. And it's also quite reasonable. And funnily enough, you can buy the 14-30 f4 and Laowa 12mm f2.8 rectilinear zero distortion lens, that's a mouthful, for less than the price of the 14-24 f2.8 lens on its own. So think about that one. And the one other funny thing about this lens is I use 100mm filters on this lens. Yes, I've adapted my Format High Tech Firecrest filter holder so it'll actually fit on to the lens itself. And basically I managed to fit on an adapter ring just over the actual collars on the actual lens itself. They just kind of slide on and the rotating ring is on so I can actually pop on and off the filter holder. So I can use 100mm filters on a 12mm lens. And for people shouting, oh, who'd want to do that? It's a fisheye lens. It is not a fisheye lens. This is a rectilinear lens. This has to be one of my favorite lenses for seascape photography. The perspective shift you can get with this lens, how you can transform a photograph is frightening. And it really and truly is frightening. I can pop up another video at some other stage if you want, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as regards to perspective shift and how you can change a person's perception of a scene simply by shooting on 12mm. The other thing I should say here is I've absolutely no affiliation to Laowa, and I bought this lens myself and whatnot, and as you can see it's being used with my F to Z adapter. Now you can also buy a Z mount version of this lens so you don't have to use the F to Z adapter, and I was tempted to do it, but it's basically the same thing with a spacer added is my understanding, so I thought I have the F to Z adapter, why bother? The last photography genre to discuss then is travel photography. And yes, obviously enough, the 14-30 f4 is going to be your complete winner there. Again, for a few different reasons. Firstly, weight, which for travel photography is huge. Size, again massive. And the other added bonuses, this is a 14-30 in comparison to a 14-24. So it's a bit more versatile and it will give you a bit more reach. So for travel photography, for me personally, purely because of weight, size and extra reach, it has to be the 14-30 f4 lens. Just to quickly round up then the advantages of both lenses. The 14-24 f2.8 will go down to f2.8, so it means it will let in one stop more light than the f4 version, or twice the amount of light, if you want to look at it that way. You will get better out of focus backgrounds too as well, obviously enough, at f2.8 than you will at f4. The 14-24 f2.8 also has faster focus than its f4 brother. That is going to be incredibly handy. For videographers then too as well, the 14-24 f2.8 is obviously a lot better too as well from the point of view of focus, obviously the one you'd want to go for there too as well. Unless you're shooting on a gimbal. So if you're shooting on a gimbal, the weight and also the size difference between the 14-30 f4 and the 14-24 f2.8, the f4 is going to win out there. It's going to make it a lot easier to use it on a gimbal. This just leaves us now with the 14-30 f4 advantages. And what are they? The first has to be price. Being half the price of the f2.8 equivalent, that's just crazy. Value for money wise, the 14-30 f4 has to be the one to get. The second is weight. The third is size. And finally then, and the more important one for me personally, is the ability to be able to use 100mm filters on the lens itself. That is absolutely massive, and that is really what swung me to the 14-30 f4 lens. And yes, I know the 14-24 f2.8 is fractionally sharper. There is fractionally less distortion. There's fractionally more contrast. But these really are fractional, and I mean incredibly fractional differences. So what do you think? Which one would you buy? Have you a clear favourite in the two of them? Do you own one of these lenses already? Or have you used both like me and found you have a clear preference? Please do let me know. Thanks again for watching. See you out there and mind yourselves.